invite you to greet those around you with peace. If you're doing live stream, you might want to write peace on there as well. Peace. We're appropriate social distancing, just saying. Just putting it out there. All right, I figure that's enough time for peace. All right, we're coming to our gospel reading today, which comes from the Holy Gospel according to St. John chapter 10, beginning at the first verse. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way, is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls out his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all of his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they didn't understand what he was saying to them. So again, Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are the thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. This is the gospel of Christ. Praise to Christ the Word.
Kia ora whanau. Just want to tell a story of my first sheep experience of note. And it happened when I was in high school, and my basketball team, Hamilton High School basketball team, went to South to play a couple of southern schools in Southland, and I ended up being billeted on a farm, and it was a sheep farm, and I think they decided that they were going to show this towny kid real life, and so I had to learn how to ride a motorbike and do all sorts of stuff. But I remember late in the afternoon we went to the shearing shed, and they were dagging sheep. I don't know if they searched around to find the daggiest sheep to dag that they could find, but that's what happened. Here I am with these shearing shears in my hand, and this very unpleasant rear end of a sheep to shear. And I don't know who was more traumatized, the sheep or me, because I did a terrible job, but for the life of me, I can't remember whether we won or lost the basketball games. All I can remember is my sheep experience. This passage we read, the sheep farming model is really different in the New Testament world to our own. We have big flocks of sheep that don't respond to human voices but know the bark of a dog. In this world, the shepherd of the sheep probably only owns about 10 sheep, and it's kind of like quite an intimate family really, where they're used to hearing the voice of the shepherd calling them, leading them. And so this passage begins with telling us that the shepherd comes and calls the sheep out of the sheepfold. So the sheepfold was probably a 2-metre walled area in a village where all the flocks would be brought at night to protect them from theft. So the shepherd would come to the door and he would call out to the sheep, and the sheep would hear the voice of their shepherd and come on out, and he would take them to find pasture for the day. So the first part of the metaphor that Jesus is developing is that he is the shepherd of the sheep, and he calls, and the sheep hear his voice and respond to him. And that's the whisper that all of us are like that. all of us are hardwired to hear Jesus' voice and to respond and head into life with him. The second part of the story is probably now they're out in the wild, maybe far away from the village, nowhere safe. So they create a temporary shelter with rocks and bracken. And in that situation, the shepherd would become the gate where they would lie in the gap to protect the flock from wolves, theft or whatever. So the shepherd puts their body on the line to protect the sheep, and that theme will be developed in the second part of John 10. So we've got two themes here, the shepherd coming to the wolves and the closed door and calling, and the focus is on the voice of the shepherd, and the second element is of the gate. And I want to just unpack those two elements a little bit. So I want to talk about the gated life. I don't know about how you see your life, but I think, and many people I talk to find that their lives are more closed than they used to be. We have less time for people, and we have less ability to connect than we used to because of, I think, our work lives and the stress that we live under. And so the closing of lives is a feature of our world, but it's showed very practically in the increase in gated communities. And partly in terms of New Zealand, that's the retirement world where gated communities are forming at retirement. But in the United States and in other countries, the gated communities are a massive feature. About 1/8 of Americans live in gated communities, carefully excluding people with high level security. A well-known case in America is the killing of Trayvon Williams. Happened in 2013 in Florida, and he was a young black man who was too near to a gated community, and a self-appointed vigilante protecting the community shot him, though he wasn't armed, and there's no witnesses, so the shooter got off without even a manslaughter charge, even though the young black man was unarmed. In fact, he's now taking Trayvon Williams' family to court for damages. So we won't go into the intriguing legal system that allows that, but what I'm highlighting here is how viciously we guard our closed spaces now, and that our lives are gated, and often our hearts are gated too, and in terms of being careful to exclude rather than include. Our closed hearts and lives create a challenge for us because God comes and calls us out. It calls us to come out and follow him. And the life of responding to Jesus as the shepherd is not the safe life. It involves us going into life itself and following him wherever he leads, trusting him in his leading. And so I want to suggest that part of the core of the Christian life is responding to the shepherd of our souls and learning to trust his voice and his leading, and not seeing God as threat, but seeing God as the safest voice to respond to. Because often the loudest voice in us is our anxiety, our fear of what might happen, and our fear of losing control. And the closing of our lives is all about control and trying to anxiously find a way to be safe. And the COVID virus has thrown us into that too, self-protection. And I hope this is not a permanent thing, because the shepherd of our souls calls us to follow him and go out into a big world and experience life with him. So that's the first part of this metaphor that Jesus is developing. The risk of a gated life, and God will always be an invasion to the closed heart and life. But the thing is, you are hardwired to know the voice of the shepherd. And there's a divine whisper that comes, and we just know, actually, I'm not happy with this life. I'm not happy with where I am. I want to move. And sometimes he just puts his finger on the thing that is time to change. So maybe in this season you're hearing the whisper of God, and I encourage you to respond to that, because He's calling you out of your gated life and into a life of adventure. The second element of this passage is around the life gate, which is the shepherd himself who lies in the gate to protect the sheep. All of us, I think, have an instinct for the kind of gates that we want to go through to get the life we've always wanted. Karen and I have been watching the English Game on Netflix, and it's interesting, the story of football, soccer, and how the wealthy, the elite public school people controlled the game, and slowly working class men find a future in the game by being professionals, and they can get out of the cotton mills and be paid for being good at football. And for them, the only gate they could see that gave them a future is sport. Sport still was one of those gates we want to go through to have the life we've always wanted. But for many of us, it's a well-manicured life, the presenting a life of success. Sometimes it's career and finance. Sometimes we're just escapist, and we go through the gate of escapism, which sometimes leads to addiction. Whatever the case, addiction, Bill Easom says, is the universal experience. We really, all of us in this anxious, demanding world are at risk of developing habits that are addictive and actually become gates we go through that cause death and rob us of our lives. And many of you will have friends and family who this is their experience. If we go through the wrong gate, we find death. And Jesus is saying here that He is the gate that leads to life, and not only a life, but abundant life. That through His body we find life. And this is a very subtle reference to what Jesus does on the cross at Easter, where He dies. He takes upon Himself, upon His body, our sin, that we could be forgiven and set free and find life. The cross is the gauge of God's love for us, that God so loved us, He was prepared to die for us as the shepherd of our souls. And this kind of a death reveals that God's use of power is very unorthodox. He is the God who will take the rap for us, will take punishment for us, that we can experience salvation from the very dark gates we sometimes go down. Whatever the gate is that you've gone through and wherever you've ended up, Jesus is still a life gate for you. You can still come in to His fold and find grace and salvation there. The last thing I want to say about this passage is that this is not only an invitation for us to find salvation and restoration, it's also an invitation for us to live like Jesus. This is an invitation to us to call out others and to be there for others and to help others find life and find it abundantly, to shepherd others into the finding of life. And we're meant to be on a mission, and this passage is saying that Jesus' mission is this, and we're invited into exactly the same thing. We're called to see the crowd and see that actually people are sheep without a shepherd. They don't know how to live now. And we have a mission in showing the heart of the shepherd to everyone whose lives we touch. So may God bless you as you are seeking to be like this during this strange time that we're in. May God bless you.